recording just my screen. You don't have to worry about your face or anything. I'm just recording this presentation part. So we're gonna continue what we learned last week and practice it a little bit more. I know in that eDoc homework of mine, some of you were pretty good at it, some of you were a little lost, some of you forgot some detail, and some of you did excellent job that I couldn't have done much better myself. So if you're doing good work, keep doing it. If you are lost or something, learn to focus and also trying to figure it out. Don't ever do things by getting it over with. Imagine if one day you're gonna cook the best meal for the person that you care the most for in the world, and all you do is just let's just get this over with. People can sense it, and when people can sense your intention, they will react with it appropriately. If you want to get something over with, trust me, the reaction will be appropriate. Karma will bite you. So take the time to do it carefully. 7 minute versus 8 minute or 9 minute. That extra minute to read something carefully is not that much time. Okay. So this is a picture of my home country from many years ago. This is a school back in the 1960s, early 70s. And the word that all the kids are practicing writing, and you can see how they practice handwriting technique there in elementary school, is the word jam. Jam means to focus. So one of the first words they teach them when they officially begin school after kindergarten, now that they are an actual student in the class, is to focus. And learning to focus and participate is a very important fact. If you don't write the word, your teacher can never give you feedback on your handwriting, um, or your partner on the same table. You guys notice on the table had two students right next to each other. They will participate and help each other out. Some of them are really nice for some of the kids who are handicapped. They would actually hold each other's hand and help to do it. So that's my goal for you guys, to be better human being. So I can't give example from other places, but I can give example from my life. So before I was born, some of my siblings were kids during the Vietnam War, and of course, war. There's horrible things that are done, and then there's opportunity for people to shine as good human beings. Over here on the left, you guys see that there are two American military police. MP stand for military police. This African American gentleman and this other Caucasian gentleman. When they were finished with their patrol and they noticed that some enemy were coming, for example, they saw some kid that were left behind, or the kids that were just not with any parents anymore because their parents might have been killed in the battle. So these gentlemen right here, instead of being focused on, okay, let's just go back and get some rest for a little bit, they took 5 or 10 minutes to help carry some of this kid to some of the other local who was still alive, to give them some nutrition or to care for them. On the right, you see another gentleman right here. After a village was shelled, that means cannon shot it from the enemy, after a battle, and the battle just died down a little bit, this gentleman right here found one of the lady that was still stuck in her house, and because she's partially paralyzed, he helped to carry her out. So participation. Don't be average. Aim to be above average. If you just aim to be average, you will never grow. If you aim to be below average, obviously you're gonna regress or get lower. But always aim to be slightly above average. I don't need it to be extraordinary, but at least aim to be a little bit above. Okay. Observation we notice here from what our class discussion is, they are all very small compared to the size of the fruit that we find in America. So these are the fruit that have been growing there for decades. That means it's been longer than my life has been. They just keep the same seed and they keep growing it and growing it. They don't buy any genetically modified seed. They don't use chemical fertilizer at all. And most they might use is compost, or like animal product like animal poop, like chicken poop or cow poops or things like that. But those are natural organic fertilizer. If you haven't got a chance yet, for those of you who just joined, we made an observation about the fruit being small, and now we're writing a question. So one thing I noticed when you guys did your observation on the headphone thing and the assignment with headphone, a lot of you just stuck with headphone. The question just asks you what is a good brand that's the best. You could have talked about shoes. You could have talked about whether it's Xbox, PlayStation, or PC, which brand is good for like cars. So don't always just follow the example I give, but learn to be creative. Because the more creative you are, the more you can make a product that everyone else wants to buy. You gotta stand out in this market. So always try to push yourself to be above and beyond. Mr. Wu do not give you any negative feedback when you try and be expressive or creative. in terms of creativity and doing the assignment as best as you can. So don't always fall for following the example and just sticking with it. A prediction based on that. So will these organic fruit have more concentration of sugar than the bigger fruit in the US is a question. Now, a prediction. What would be an appropriate prediction? So I already know what the answer is, but pretend when I was buying it at the market, right? When this lady was sitting on the ground on a little mat selling this fruit, I predicted that these will have more sugar than the American fruit. So how would I put that in a proper scientific method? So if you haven't got a chance to write your hypothesis yet, go ahead and still continue to do that. But this is, for example, my hypothesis. Remember, a hypothesis has to be testable. I can create an experiment on action plan to test it, to measure it. So if you measure the concentration of these organic fruit, then you will find a high concentration. You'll find a higher concentration than the fruit here. Here I didn't give the reason yet, but that's just the hypothesis part, okay? So I want you to focus on the hypothesis is if we do something or if there's an action. In this case, the action is I measure, then I will find high concentration in the fruit here. Obviously, I could add the reason behind it to make it a more complete hypothesis, like our homework. But just the hypothesis part alone, the prediction part alone, that's the prediction. So what is a logical reason for the fruit being so sweet? Some of you already mentioned it because they're smaller, they're more compact, right? So here, just like some of you already added it, I added it. Since the fruit are smaller, I would put that after my hypothesis, period. Since the fruit are smaller, all the sugar would be concentrated from the plant into a smaller volume. So these people, when they grow fruit, if they see some fruit that are a little smaller that is not growing at first, they'll pick it off or they'll trim the branch so that way there'll be less branches on the tree. So what does that mean? All the sugar that is collected from the leaf by photosynthesis or from the root that's coming up, they're going to be pushed into a smaller fruit. Because if you're selling fruit and your fruit doesn't taste as good as someone else, no one's going to buy from you. So they always want to bring the best product to you. By the way, most of the people that were selling this fruit, they're only educated or they only get a chance to go to school up to about 5th grade. So even though they're like 40, 50, 60-year-old, they only have a 5th grade education, but they still know how to make logical observation, hypothesis, and then from that they carry out an experiment. They try different way of trimming the tree, they try different organic fertilizer, they try different amount of water. One of them told me that if you want the fruit to ripen faster at the end and you need to sell it soon, you just decrease the amount of water you give it, and the fruit think that the season is changing. Like, when we go from summer to fall like today, the fruit will become sweeter. Apple becomes sweeter when the water is lower and the season start getting colder. So you a vaccine. If you test a vaccine for coronavirus, you give 100 people between the age of 20 and 25 the vaccine that you're testing. You also give 100 people between the age of 20 to 25 an injection of salt water. They both think they got the vaccine. They don't know who got the vaccine and who doesn't. So you see both groups have people between the age of 20 and 25. Both groups have 100 people. Both groups are shot with 10 milliliter or 10 cc of liquid. Both groups are treated by the same doctor. The only difference is one group get the vaccine they're testing and one group gets the fake vaccine. So the only difference is real versus fake. So remember, whenever you do an experiment, you only can have one thing different. Everything else should be the same. Okay, so once again, take a minute to type in the chat an action on how to test which fruit is sweeter. So once again, for the homework today, you're going to try to create an experiment to test this observation and hypothesis. So Mr. Wu noticed that the children walking is slightly less wet compared to the children running. So let's see, Mr. Wu noticed that student walking in the rain has clothing that appear to him from far away to be slightly less. I forgot to put the word wet in there, so I do apologize for that. Wet, okay? Compared to student running. So from that, I make a prediction. If you run in the rain, then your clothing will get wetter compared to someone else, or then compare, then, sorry, that's just, I'm a little dyslexic, so my brain's a little messed up there. It will get a little wetter than someone walking at a medium speed. So let me take out the would want come. Yep. Than someone walking at a medium speed. So I predict that if you walk, you will be less wet than someone who's running. Now, how can we test that? So for your homework today, go ahead on page 5. Tell me a plan on how to test that. How can you tell, or how can you test if a kid who's walking is less wet than a kid who's running? Okay, think about the clothing. Focus on the detail on the clothing. And then we can use like a sprinkler to simulate rain, okay? So we can keep all the kits the same size. We have 20 kits all about the same height and shape. We can have them all wear the same shirt. We measure the weight of the shirt at first, and then we measure it afterward to see how much water it soaks up. So those are some examples I want you to think about. So try to think about that, and when we come back on Thursday, we will actually create an experiment based on this, logically speaking, and then we will practice that one more time before I assign you the quiz on Friday. So with that, quick summary for today, and we're done. Observation, be as detailed as possible. Your scientific question cannot have human feelings or culture-based information. Things like sweetness or bitterness, you can taste that. That's not feeling. That's actually a tasting, and that's a measurable science thing. Hypothesis should always be if, then, and then the explanation afterward. And when you create your experiment, everything should be the same between the two groups that you're testing. The walker versus the runner. They have to have the same clothing, the same body size, they have to have the same rain, they have the same distance, everything the same. You only can have one thing that's different. In this case, the one thing different is their speed. One is walking at a medium speed and one is running. So with that, please try to write down an experiment in your notebook on page 5. So that way when we come back on Thursday, you're ready to discuss it, okay? No judgment, once again. All of this is just for me to guide you so you can get to the correct answer. So when you take the quiz on Friday, all of you will get 100%. And with that, Mr. Vu is done. Is there any